Hi, everyone, and welcome to the next edition of Women's Wisdom Through the Ages. For those of you who haven't met me before, my name's Catherine J or Catherine Joy, and I'm here with the lovely Anjali Nadaradjane. Hopefully, I pronounced that correct.
It's all good.
Okay, and Anjali has been on before, but we had so much positive feedback, and just everyone was just saying, wow, who is this young lady? So I've actually invited her back again today. That's awesome. And also, I've invited her, like Anjali and I have a few things in common, and one of them is Indonesia. So we'll actually touch on a few things, that we have in common and different things. So it's just lovely to have her on. If it's your very first time with us, I'll just give you a little bit of background about the Women's Wisdom Through the Ages podcast. It's partly profiling women. So it's usually women with a business, sometimes with a social enterprise, or sometimes women that are really inspiring, that are outside those parameters. And so Anjali would fit into that. And she's a very accomplished young lady. So I will actually get her to introduce herself in a moment and just share a few things. The reason for that is I've just had to change locations, and I've just realised that I haven't got my information right there. And so as we age, we think differently. So I know when I was a teenager, I'm sure I probably drove everybody crazy thinking I knew everything. When I was in my 20s, I probably thought even more so I knew everything. But then things weren't going right. And then I was like, oh, maybe I don't know as much as I think I know. And so I think that a lot of people like myself, that the older you get, you realize you actually don't know half as much as what you thought you knew at every time. So it's like, I think it's a lesson in humility as you get older. It's like the more you know, the you realize the less you know about things. And aside from that, it's wonderful when people are really young. They sometimes haven't, yes, everybody's got a story and been through things, but sometimes when you're older, you can be a little bit weary because you've been through the rough and tumble of life. And so it's awesome to be around young people who have usually got that energy and that drive, and maybe haven't been through as tough times. Sometimes they have, but when we're coming together, that's when I think that we can say the magic happens, or the genius side of things happen, because people at different ages think differently. We're coming with different mindsets. So are you a millennial?
I think I'm the generation just after millennials. So I'm Generation Z, I believe.
Oh, okay. Yep. And I'm a Gen X. So I've just entered my 50s, and Anjali's just recently turned 22. Is that right?
That's
Yep.
correct.
Wonderful. Okay. So, like Anjali is studying law and international relations, and she's so accomplished. So there's quite a few things that we're going to be touching on today. But Anjali, would you like to just share a few of your, work experience, internships, things like that?
Absolutely. So as Catherine mentioned, I'm a Bachelor of Laws and Bachelor of Arts student, and I major in international relations. And I've always enjoyed international relations because I've had an interest in history, politics, global affairs, and the way our world works. In terms of my work experience, I've done quite a few different and diverse things. I spent a lot of time in Indonesia, where I actually volunteered a lot of my time teaching English as a second language, as well as interning at law firms and policy research think tanks. Back here in Australia, I was a research associate at the Australian Taxpayers Alliance, which is a grassroots organisation focused on lowering taxes, cutting government burden and wasteful expenditure, and fighting for individual liberties. And I've also been a paralegal at another corporate law firm called Minter Ellison. And within my university time, I've also been very much involved in politics and engaging young people in politics.
And that's like, wow. It's when we went through last time, and I had so many people comment like, oh my gosh, how old is this young lady? And so that is just awesome. But I just wanted to acknowledge Anjali for that as well. I saw a post on LinkedIn, I think it was just yesterday, and just saying that no matter how old you are, you can really get involved, you can make a difference. And especially through internships, internships are awesome. So it might just be for 2 weeks, it might be for 3 months, it might be during term, I think very rarely, but we're more so on the holidays. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I would definitely agree. I think every young person should do an internship if they're possible.
Hmm.
And I think there's also been, to some extent, this idea that internships aren't good because they're not paid. But I think that a lot of the best experiences that I've had are actually through unpaid internships, because
Yeah,
many organizations don't have the funds, but they're able to provide some really important skills and experiences to young people
yeah,
that they could get a lot of advantages from.
yeah. And I would say that even for older people, not
Yeah.
necessarily for an internship, because usually that is talking about somebody younger, but like a lot of the board positions that I was on. No, I didn't
Oh,
get paid, but it was just, such an amazing experience. But then as you're going through, it can help you with your career. Obviously, it expands your thinking, increases your connections and the way that you look at the world. And then, hopefully in the future, that it'll be also leading you to maybe advance through the ranks quicker when you do get into your career. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So they're just a wonderful opportunity. And yeah, so many different things there. So today, what I thought would be quite different to last time. Like last time, Anjali was talking about students coping with COVID, and that was, yeah, really important. That is still on YouTube as well as on Podbean. But today we're going to do something a little bit different. Um, so both Anjali and I have spent time in Indonesia, and we've both spent time, supporting or volunteering in different organisations, or myself, quite often paid positions in different organisations. And it's very different, especially when you're dealing with a group overseas. So the first one I want to ask you about is, what experiences did you have volunteering in Indonesia, and what did you want to achieve from them before you started?
Absolutely. So I actually went to Indonesia on two separate exchanges. The
Hmm.
first time I was there for 6 months, and the second time I was there for 6 weeks working at a law firm.
Hmm.
And in both instances, I really wanted to actually understand the lives of Indonesians, especially Indonesians that you don't see in your workplace or in schools, but are in communities far off from the cities. And I really wanted to engage on a cross-cultural level and actually understand their everyday lives, their situations,
Hmm.
their struggles, and also make a difference and actually contribute or be useful to them, because I was
Hmm.
only there in Indonesia for such a short period of time, and I wanted to offer as much as possible and do as much as possible.
Yeah.
So some of the organizations I actually volunteered for included Keja Aurora and Rumah Pohon.
Hmm.
And in English, Rumah Pohon means treehouse. And both of these organizations were quite similar in that they were focused on children, and they were focused on teaching children skills and soft skills especially. And these children that were part of these organizations were often from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. So for example, of Keja Aurora, it was a community that was involved in providing opportunities to these kids to be able to develop skills, to become innovators and leaders in their communities as they grew older, and not to miss out
Wow.
on opportunities just because they came from low socioeconomic backgrounds, didn't have the same educational opportunities as some of other kids in Indonesia. So
Hmm.
part of my role there was essentially teaching them English, teaching them soft skills, teaching them leadership, empathy, communication skills, problem solving skills. And what was really great about these community organizations, this was kind of like a really nice space for these kids to just grow and develop, because
Yeah.
so much of their community was very impoverished. They didn't have a lot of space to play or to be kids.
Hmm.
So I really found it a very interesting experience to be able to help these kids and help them develop those soft skills, as well as teach them a lot about English and to teach them a bit about Australia,
Hmm.
and just inspire them a little bit as well, especially as they'd never been exposed or met foreigners before.
Wow. And where was that one? The Rumah Pohon? Was that in Jakarta, or where was that?
Jakarta, so it was in Tangerang, which is in southwestern Jakarta, so just on the border. And Keja Aurora was in Bandung, sort of on the outskirts of Bandung while I was studying there.
Okay. And for those of you who know Indonesia, Bandung is very famous. It's in West Java, beautiful place, very, I would say, almost like high culture, great for fashion. Like a lot of the
Very
fashion houses, even from Europe, they buy from Bandung, so it's great for shopping. Um, and yeah, so we've both lived in Jakarta, both lived in different places around Indonesia. So we connected straight away. And we've probably known each other now maybe 6 months, maybe 8 or 9 months.
yeah. Since
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So yeah, so for me, I love to hear that, and especially because one thing that we've been doing with Imagineering to a Better World, even from the beginning, was I used to go up to Bali in this particular case, and I would work with the girls that were too old for the orphanages. And that's, I've always had a sort of a special place there, because it's like, well, what do you do? Where do they go? Who helps them? And there's an organisation, the Australian guy that started it has passed away recently, but he just has this amazing program. And so I used to try and go up once a year and do some Imagineering seminars and some, developing financial intelligence and emotional intelligence seminars and things, all for free. So I love that. So especially when you've got people from disadvantaged, impoverished backgrounds, and especially I think in a place like Indonesia, because it's so different to Australia. In Australia, um, things have changed where I think every child feels special, probably a little bit too far in some ways. That means teamwork is a challenge compared to when I was growing up. Everything was about teamwork, so you built each other up. Whereas now it's sometimes a little bit too much. You've got too many bosses rather than the followers. However, in Indonesia, you've got so many people there. So to come there and just love on these kids and just help them, and or whether they be young people, and just to have, especially foreigners coming in, they just love it. And it's just so needed, because when they don't have, especially because Indonesia is a developing country, we are so blessed here. So it's awesome to hear that that you went over there and were doing that, and just experience a lot of the culture there.
Absolutely.
So yeah. And so did you achieve everything you wanted to achieve there? Did you feel like that you had self-satisfaction, that you actually made a difference?
I believe so. I think because, especially in these communities where these kids have never really been exposed to non-Indonesians or such opportunities, to be able to learn
Mm-hmm.
English for them was extremely rewarding. They were so excited every time I came to visit, because for them, I was a new person, someone they weren't used to, but also someone that was offering them a really fun and interesting way to learn another language, which is so important in Indonesia with everything becoming so globalized. So I felt very fulfilled in what I was doing, but
Mm-hmm.
also was very much aware that there was still a lot to be resolved and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of issues that are still continue to exist. I had a friend over there who started one of these social enterprises,
Mm-hmm.
which was basically about waste management, and that
Mm-hmm.
was actually part of her initiative was to create this rumah pohon, because of the fact that these kids lived in such unsanitary environments,
Mm-hmm.
trying to create a safe space for them to just grow and develop and
Mm-hmm.
be kids.
Mm-hmm.
So one of her other initiatives was actually waste management and finding solutions to some of the issues in these communities. So there are still a lot of other broader issues that
Mm-hmm.
impact these kids that I personally would not be sufficient to resolve. So it made me also aware of some of the issues that still need to be, I guess,
Yeah.
tackled in the future.
Yeah. So just for those people who haven't been to Indonesia, can you just share what it looks like on a day-to-day basis? Where might these children have been living? What was the living situation? Just give us an idea of what they were living with each day.
Yeah, so in these particular communities, the parents of these communities, they live in sort of semi-illegal areas of Jakarta, which means that a lot of the land is really dry, arid, but also a lot of rubbish collection happens in there, and a lot of waste disposal happens. So they're essentially living around landfills or waste landfills, in sort of small tin houses or very extremely dilapidated living situations. There isn't a lot of drinking water. There isn't supplies of food, and even the food they're eating and things is really, like, it's quite difficult to see the situation they live in, because these kids are running around, but the ground is muddy and it's full of rubbish and glass and sharp objects, and it's not a very safe and sanitary living conditions. So for a lot of people living in Australia, they could never imagine to live in something in that scenario, but this is what these kids and these families live in every single day.
Yeah. And I know one of the things that I found, because I've lived in Jakarta amongst other places in Java, and one thing I found really difficult was when it flooded, all of
Yes.
that yuck off the ground, especially people would spit everywhere. Not everybody and not every area, but there was a lot of people that would spit on the ground. So I hate it when people spit on the ground here, because when I was living in Jakarta, I would be all dressed for work, and I'd be, going up to catch the taxi, or, when I was at uni, going to the, catch the Kol Putri, the little bus that, but all that spit and everything would come up on my feet. And
Yes.
it was just, and can you imagine if, like people that don't know about those situations, there's just, like you said, it's so unsanitary. So, we're worried now if we don't wash our hands, or, like what I've tried to do lately is, when people are talking about the masks, I've just thought, well, when I'm in Indonesia, I just use my wrap. So I just wrap my scarf around, because then it's much easier to breathe through.
Exactly.
So, but if like, say, for example, if these children, if they're stepping on a sharp object, then that's going in there, they probably haven't had a tetanus shot.
Absolutely.
So
And actually, there, I saw a lot of kids that had suffering from malnourishment. There was one infant, he was essentially so malnourished that he couldn't even keep his head up. And these are sort of the situations they live in. The families just can't afford those medical supplies, and they're reliant on social enterprises like Rumah Pohon and the volunteers there to help them provide that assistance.
Yeah, there's so many wonderful ones, which is just awesome. And also, one of the other things that you did in Indonesia was you interned at a policy research think tank, so the Resilience Development Initiative. So what were some of the issues that you worked on there?
Absolutely, yeah. So Resilient Development Initiative, first of all, is a policy think tank focused in disaster relief,
Oh,
but they
wow.
also things like renewable energy, regional and urban policies, welfare for kids. But I was actually had a specific research interest in women's health issues in Indonesia that had grown out of other internship experiences back in Australia. So what I was focused on was trying to research public health policies to help rural women in Indonesia that didn't have proper health services or systems, particularly if they were pregnant. They didn't have the proper systems to deliver children safely, and that was actually contributing to high infant mortality rates as well as risk for women's health. So I did a lot of research in that area, specifically in Lombok and Nusa Tenggara Barat, which is where Lombok is located, as well as in Jakarta. I could see that these issues were actually across the archipelagos as well, and that was really fascinating. But also, it did shine a light on some of the grave difficulties that many of these women face in rural communities.
Yeah, and like you said, so important. Yeah, and so was there anything that you came up with, or that you were part of a team that came up with, that made a difference while you were there?
Yeah, so part of the research team I was part of, so I was sort of heading the research of public health policies, was actually to design some of these policies and put them forward. So it's a policy think tank. They had the platform to be able to present these ideas to governmental bodies. So what we were suggesting various strategies such as education for women, particularly because many of these women in these areas didn't realize the issues they were facing, or realize that the communities they were living in didn't have those services, or they didn't know to check with the doctor if they had any issues. So that was leading to a lot of complications when they became pregnant, for example, as well as sort of also educating the wider community about ways that women could also support themselves financially and become more empowered to be able to look after their families, especially if they were one of the, because of the fact that, they had large families and didn't have the means to support them all. So we were trying to put forward these policies, and I think it was really successful, because I also got to sort of talk to women's officers from Oxfam who were on the ground in Lombok as well, to kind of discuss how we could share our ideas together as well to support those.
Yeah, and again, there's so many different programs. I've had a few of my friends even head up organisations over there that have just been especially working with women and, you know, and social enterprises. So it's so important that we need to be helping people through what they're doing in their own countries or their own situations, but how can we add value and to what they're already doing there?
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'll just give you an example. I was living in East Timor, and a belief there was that if you were pregnant, you had to eat lots of rice.
Right.
And so one of the girls that I lived in the homestay, she was pregnant, or sorry, she was breastfeeding, and so she
Okay.
would eat like a mountain of rice because that was the belief. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I don't know about that. I'm thinking, you know, like a diet, you know, you know, with all your different parts. But again, it's just, you know, did you find that as well, that you're dealing like different cultural aspects or religious aspects, that you have to bring all of those in?
Yeah, in
And
fact, yeah, that was actually one of the issues in Lombok because
mhm,
many of the cultural norms there had certain cultural ideas that were actually unhealthy for the mother, and they were continuing to perpetuate these just because it was part of their cultural norms. And part of actually our public health policies was to try
mhm.
and educate women to understand that some of these cultural norms are actually harming themselves or their child.
Yeah, yeah. But again, I think like, and imagine, I'm sure you would have that. You have to be so respectful and understand. Like I know, you know, you were speaking the language back then. You're probably a bit rusty now. Mine's coming back a little bit because I'm using it more often. Um, but not only the language, you can understand the language, but if you don't understand the protocols, it's
Exactly.
so different. You won't have the doors open to you if you don't understand the protocols of how to go about things. So that's just wonderful. And especially to hear that you went back, you know, a couple of times and have, you know, experience in different places. It's just wonderful. And I mean, and again, I'm just going to reiterate, Anjali is still a student. These are all the internship experiences that she had. I mean, I did mine, especially when I started going to Indonesia. I was a mature age student. I think I was maybe 25, 26 when I started going over. But, and I still had, you know, some similar experiences, but amazing if you can have them while you're younger. It just sets you up so much quicker to, you know, yeah. And I have a question, which is, what made you think of helping people? Like, why should you help people? Like, not everybody wants to do that. It's a lot of people at the moment, I think, especially with COVID, they're
Mm.
feeling, you know, very insular and what about me? What about my feelings? And but you're not like that. So tell us a bit about that. Why are you like the way you are?
Well, I think I've always wanted to make some sort of difference, and I think as a child, I was always told by my parents, you know, if you put your mind to something and you work hard, you can achieve what you want. And I've seen that a lot in other pursuits I've taken academically and
Hmm.
other avenues. So I've always wanted to make a difference, and I've always found from my experiences looking at how social enterprises work that
Hmm.
there is an enormous good that can be done in our community, and there's so many gaps in services, and I've always wanted to just be part of that that basically trying to help other people in different ways, where I could offer and be useful. So I think when I went to Indonesia, I thought, well, I'm coming here for study, but I also want to just be useful. I want to be able to offer my skills, and make the most of the time I'm there to help people there, because there is so much need. And I felt that I came from a very privileged background. I'd, had a great education. I was studying law, I was studying arts. I had a community of friends. I had great job opportunities here. And I've always, worked hard towards those, but I've never suffered the same economic disadvantages that many of these kids face,
Yeah.
in Indonesia, particularly, where they really have nothing and they live in, as I mentioned, some of the most unsanitary environments you can imagine, and we're trying to give them hope, basically. So I think when you see it yourself and you experience what they see,
Hmm.
that's when you start to realize that something needs to be done. And I think it's sort of part of human nature to want to do something about that and to make some sort of difference that benefits others.
Yeah. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. When you experience it and you're part of it and you get to know these wonderful people, and you just want to help. Yeah, absolutely.
And
Um,
I, yeah.
well, sorry, you go.
Sorry, I was just going to mention with with Indonesians in particular, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure you've seen it, they're some of the most kindest and generous people I've ever met. And I think when I came there when I was 19 years old, I was so shocked at how generous people were. They were willing to go the extra mile for me, to take me around, say Bandung or Jakarta, without asking anything from me. And I think that made me sort of feel a bit bad about myself. I thought, well, I'm not nearly as selfless as some of these people, and I have much more than they do, and they have much less than I do.
Yeah.
So I think part of that was making me realize I need to be more humble and to have more humility in what I do, and that was also sort of a driving factor.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that, whether it be, in anywhere. I've lived in Java, like I've
Yeah,
lived in, in Jakarta, I've lived in Yogyakarta, and also I found the same in Bali. And it's
yeah.
just, I've had the most amazing generosity, shown to me as well. So that's just lovely to hear. Um, And I know, for example, I'll give a shout out to Berta, because I know Berta in Bali, or different friends in Bali will be watching, or, different people. So it does go around, like quite a few of my Facebook friends, for example, are, Indonesian. So, um, yeah. So one other thing I want to check out, that you also were in Singapore. So the
Yes,
one in Singapore was the Summer Enterprise Program at the National University of Singapore. And then you chose to pitch a social enterprise. So tell us about that.
yeah. So while I was in National University of Singapore, part of the Summer Enterprise program was to pitch an enterprise. It could be a tech startup, it could be a social enterprise, and you have to work with a team of different students across ASEAN to come up in a very short space of time a
Mm-hmm.
business or a viable enterprise. So one of the members in my team, she was from Pakistan, and
Mm-hmm.
she
Yeah.
see the need in Pakistan. She was very passionate about women's education, but she could see that there were lots of impacts that were affecting young girls being able to go to school. And one of them was the fact that they didn't have proper feminine hygiene products, nor proper feminine hygiene facilities. So part of our social enterprise was to create feminine hygiene products that were both sustainable for the environment, but also would
Mm-hmm.
enable women to gain jobs, so they could actually help in the making or production of these products, as well as to educate young girls on these products, how to use them, but also to ensure that they could actually go to school. And I think being in Singapore, it's a
Mm-hmm.
great startup hub. There is so much investment in Singapore that goes into startups, and it was a
Yes.
really great way as well to just immerse myself in just the entrepreneurial and cultural scene of Singapore, understand
Mm-hmm.
Asian business culture, and actually work with people across ASEAN, which is so important, especially in today when we're living in Australia and we're so close to Southeast Asia, and there are nearest countries are Indonesia, Singapore,
Mm.
Malaysia. So
Yeah.
it was very interesting to sort of just be around very conscious, like-minded people who were passionate about driving social change and making an impact through various initiatives in their community, such as social enterprises.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And I think it's so important too, like when you're in Indonesia or Singapore, you can have orang pribumi, who are ethnic Indonesians, or you can have orang priai, who are the nobility. And then you can also have the Chinese, or you have, the Arabs coming over, just so many different mixes. So it's just fascinating to hear that you've got all those experiences. And I imagine, especially in Singapore, you would have been dealing with a lot of ethnic Chinese people as well. Is that right?
Very much.
Yeah.
So I was working with both local Singaporeans as well as individuals across from Thailand to Pakistan to India. I think there was a
Wow.
girl from Kenya as well. So it was all over the globe, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. And just to let people know that you are in Australia. And so you're up the road from me in Sydney.
Yeah.
And so all your schooling's in Australia. And tell us which university you're going to.
So I go to Macquarie University,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's only about a 20-minute I think bus ride from where I live, which
Mm-hmm.
is very convenient.
Yeah. And you also have a special role at the Macquarie University.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually involved in various sort of student societies. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
the vice president for debates with my Macquarie University Liberal Club. And
Mm-hmm.
this year I took on the role of campus coordinator
Mm-hmm.
for the Institute of Public Affairs, Youth Wing Cogeneration Liberty.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's quite interesting. So first of all, for those people who are listening from overseas, liberals in Australia are not the same as liberals in America. Liberals in America are the Democrats, whereas liberals in Australia are people who believe basically if you go onto the website, it's freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise as an example. And so you could call that like conservative. And then the Institute of Public Affairs, again, is more conservative. I always get fascinated, like, why would you call it conservative? To me, it's just, why wouldn't you want freedom of enterprise? Because I might want to buy an iPhone, I might want to buy a Samsung, I might want to buy, I don't know, whatever sort of other phones there are. Obviously, I only buy those two, but I want the choice. I like the choice. I like to be able to go out to different restaurants, whereas if you're if you don't have, freedom of enterprise, then you're looking at a socialist society or even a communist society where you can only have one of. So that's, one of the reasons. And so the Institute of Public Affairs is also, that's a think tank. So that's awesome. You've been involved in, I think, 3 think tanks so far. Yeah, and even Imagineering to a Better World, one of the things that we do is a bit of a think tank. So we like to, run seminars or facilitating workshops where we can bring together different people, could be within an organisation or even within a community, to actually brainstorm some different ideas, come up with the visions for the next, say, 3-5 years, and then be able to take that forward. So that's really interesting. So you're involved like with a debating club for, like the equivalent of like Young Liberals.
Yeah, the Liberal Club has they organise debates. So I'm sort of heading and training young students to debate ideas in politics.
Yeah. And I think this, hopefully you guys don't mind, but I just love it when Anjali's on, because she's got such a wealth of knowledge. And so I'd like us to talk about something a little bit different, because in today's day and age, so sorry, it's going to go on a little bit longer than usual. So hopefully you'll stick around. So for someone your age to be a conservative or to be involved in politics and think tanks, it's really unusual. So tell us what it's like, especially like at university, or what is your life like? Is it different? Like, how is it?
It's very interesting to be a young, sort of more conservative leaning woman on campus, because there's a whole debate these days about how there's not enough academic freedom on campuses, how more leftist ideologies or viewpoints are often dominating in classrooms. So being a conservative woman, you will face a lot more challenges, or being a conservative in general, you will face more pushback from your views, and you feel afraid sometimes to speak up. Like recently, for example, I'm writing an article with a co-worker on the double standards that exist for conservatives, women's particularly, compared to left-wing women. And many of the experiences of the women I've interviewed have been that they've been anti-woman or a bigot, or they've just been afraid to speak up in class just because their tutors diminish their views or dismiss them as being blind or just optimistic.
Wow.
So I think it's really it's quite a challenge these days to be a young and conservative people. A lot of my friends, often I don't discuss politics with them because I don't want to cause conflict, or to cause them to sort of feel like I'm offending them in any way, even though I'm not. And I've been met with a lot of, I guess, pushback from even friends who don't understand my particular views, when I respect all opinions. And I'm, I think part of understanding your own viewpoints is to be challenged by them and to debate with people who have very different viewpoints.
Yeah. And I think that's the most important thing, that you can be called a conservative when you just say, hey, let's have all these different ideas. Let's talk about all of them.
Yeah.
And and that's, I know what we try and do, like either myself personally or with Imagineering to a Better World. It's about looking at, okay, what is working, what is happening around the world. That might be in Indigenous communities. It might be in, high tech, low tech, developing countries. It's about looking all over the world. And so that's probably, and I think that's where I found it quite difficult, that it seems to be that people are getting shut down. And it's not that sometimes people aren't even conservative, but they just are not going on with the most political correct at the moment. And I'm for, especially with education, like I'll just give you an example. When we go through and learn education in Australia, it's like Greek linear thinking. So we go past, present, future. Most cultures in the world don't do that. So I find that in itself is quite fascinating. And I'm not saying
Mm.
that's a right thing or a wrong thing, but hey, let's look at what other people do in other ones. And I've been really fortunate having, lived and worked in different countries and been to university even in different countries. So you get that wider view and you realize, oh, that's actually not normal. Or, it's normal for somebody from that ethnic background, that economic background, living in that country at this particular time or this particular decade. So yeah, and like you said, I think it's humbling as you go along and you know more, and it's like, oh wow, maybe I don't know, but I'm really interested to find out. So that's probably one of the things that I love about having you on, Anjali, is that even at such a young age, because of your experiences and your desires to get to know people and be involved in different things, that you're open to listening, to seeing how people are doing it, but then from a genuine heart, you actually want to be working with people and think, okay, well, how can we make it better for these people? Yeah, and working with them. So I think that's just wonderful. I'm just realizing we've probably gone over time a bit. Is there anything that you would like to share, maybe if there's young people or even older people, of when they're dealing with younger people and maybe thinking, oh, young people are, all this, they're all that, or what would you say to them?
I think they certainly have some reason to believe that, but I think there are a lot of young people I've spoken to that are involved not only in politics, but in other realms such as social enterprises that are extremely innovative, they're intelligent, they're smart, and they're critical thinkers. And I think I would tell them, like, give young people a chance to be able to thrive, to show that they can have those leadership qualities. And I think it's extremely important in this day and age to provide that platform for young people to be able to speak up on issues, and to provide all viewpoints, and to not maybe stereotype all young people into feeling that they all are entitled, because there are some very hardworking young people I know that are
Mm.
doing some really great things in their community.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I love what you just said. Give young people a chance. So that's what I would challenge everyone that's listening to just and just also to let you know that Anjali's even joined with the Imagineering project at the moment for a while, working on a couple of things, which is absolutely amazing. And we're just really privileged to have her. And we had an event the other night, and there was maybe three people. So it was like half and half, people around my age and then people around Anjali's age. And I know for me, it was just lovely just to that you're building on each other's strengths. So if you're not already doing that in your workplaces, even in your households, I would suggest look at that. Think about, okay, even ask someone, even if it's in a household, if you've got someone in their 20s or a student or a teenager, just say, this is how we do things around the house. Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it's not? What would you change?
Hmm.
So I think just, yeah, like you said, give young people a chance. Yeah, so that's just wonderful. So we thank you so much. You've been listening to Women's Wisdom Through the Ages. My name's Catherine J, or Catherine Joy, and you've been listening to Anjali Nadaradjane. And we just thank you for listening and for your time.
Thank you very much.